Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name's Victoria, and today we're going to talk about some Flannery O'Connor. I am one of the co-hosts for Flannery O January, and that is a read-along hosted by Christy Lewis from Dostoevsky in Space, and Noah from Everyone Who Reads It Must Converse. And we also kind of later added Tiffany from Beautiful Minutia. So how this read-along has been working is that each one of us has been focusing on a different work of Flannery O'Connor's. And so Christy has been reading The Habit of Being and posting about the letters of Flannery O'Connor, which have been really entertaining if you've been following along with her Instagram posts. I've been loving seeing that, and it really has inspired me to hopefully pick up some letters before the end of the month. And then Noah is reading her second novel. He's reading The Violent Bared Away, and I think that's what I'm going to be picking up next for the second half of January. So I will hopefully be finishing that book in January as well. And then Tiffany's actually been reading the short story collection, Everything That Rises Must Converge. And then I've been reading the short story collection, A Good Man Is Hard to Find. And so we've really got a lot of Flannery covered between the four of us. And I'm happy to say that I have finished my own challenge. And so now I can kind of move on to some of the other challenges. But I have finished all 10 stories of the A Good Man Is Hard to Find short story collection. And now that I have read all 10, I have thoughts. I have thoughts on all of them. And I'm going to actually rank all 10 in this video today. Hopefully as spoiler free as I can, which is difficult with short stories, but I'm going to try. And so I'm going to just start with number 10 and then go down to my favorite in the collection. And I'll talk a little bit about each one and why I've placed it there and give you a little short synopsis as well of that short story. So my number 10 in this particular collection is going to have to go to A Temple of the Holy Ghost. And this one was one of those stories that I read it and I was like, what did I just read? And by the way, just because I put some of these stories lower doesn't mean any of them are bad. They're all really good and they're all really meaty and you can chew on all of them. And I'm not saying that any of them are particularly bad, just some of them are ranked a little lower on my preference. So this list is very, very subjective. Just keep that in mind. But at my number 10, I'm going to be putting A Temple of the Holy Ghost. This story is about some young people. It follows a little group of what I think are supposed to be teenagers, and they go to a Catholic school. And when we meet them, there's quite a bit of discourse on the behavior that they are being taught in Catholic school about how to treat their bodies, how God views their bodies. A temple of the Holy Ghost, it refers to what they've been told is their body. And if you know anything about sex education and the Catholic Church, this will make sense to you. And then as the story progresses, their mentality of this is kind of challenged a little bit and changed, and Flannery O'Connor presents some challenges to that Catholic idea, which I think is fascinating because she was a devout Catholic. At least that's how I read it, is Flannery is actually challenging some of these beliefs and teachings that they're teaching the young people. I'm breaking this story as number 10 just because it didn't have really strong characters for you to latch onto. You don't particularly get a good glimpse of any one character. This story was just kind of very general. And to me, it just wasn't entirely clear on what she was saying exactly. I think I understand in the end, kind of. But to me, this story left me a little bit puzzled. And that's why it's my number 10. If it's your favorite one, let me know why. I would love to hear your interpretation of it. But yes, this will be my number 10. At number 9, I'm putting A Stroke of Good Fortune. This story is very entertaining. I think it's one of the more lighthearted as well. And when Flannery goes a little more lighthearted, I think sometimes she loses her punch because her punchy stories are the heaviest ones. And so this one being a little bit lighter, a little bit more comical, at least I thought the story was quite funny. But also a bit unbelievable. So this follows a woman who you are following her as she is kind of going up these stairs, and as she's going up this flight of stairs, she's learning something about herself. She's realizing something that everyone else around her knows, but she has not figured out yet, or is in denial of, like extreme denial. And that's all I'll say about that short story. This one depends on the reader figuring it out first. She gives you tons of clues as to what is going on with this woman, and so you as the reader are privy to what she's going through pretty early before she discovers it. And so it's definitely built around that irony, and it depends on that. It's one of those stories that I don't think it had a ton to say. I don't think it had a huge like moral core that like beats you over the head with it like a lot of her stories do. But it's still really entertaining as a story. So I enjoyed reading this, but by the end of it, I was kind of like, what was I supposed to get out of that? Similar to my experience with A Temple of the Holy Ghost. But I think if you're interested in like a lighter Flannery O'Connor story that doesn't get too crazy, this is definitely an interesting one to read and is kind of comical. At number 8, I'm putting A Late Encounter with the Enemy. This short story follows an elderly man and his granddaughter who is graduating from college, and he is a Civil War veteran. So from what I understand, this is one of her only short stories in which she does deal with the Civil War quite closely, and that's like a main topic. And so he is a veteran who kind of is put on this pedestal as a veteran, and the daughter's kind of showing him off at her graduation. But you're kind of in his head the whole time through the story, and he very much does not think about the past, and he only really lives in the present. And so you have this kind of juxtaposition of the daughter holding him up as a war hero in her family that she can kind of brag about, and then you see the inner dialogue of him, and he doesn't see it that way. He doesn't have that same experience with the war, and he doesn't connect himself with the war. He connects himself with the present. There's a lot of really interesting symbolism in this story between the past and the present, and I do think this is a stronger short story than the two that I've previously mentioned. But for some reason with this one, I didn't connect as well with the characters, and I didn't take away a ton from it. But I did appreciate the craft of this story. There's definitely a lot of symbolism and foreshadowing, and it's definitely well written. In spot number 7, I'm putting A Circle in the Fire. A Circle in the Fire was a really disturbing one to me. A Circle in the Fire follows a woman who runs this farm kind of on her own. It's really about her and her control of her farm. And then she has these 3 kind of teenage hoodlums that come and kind of vandalize and destroy the farm, and she really can't get rid of them. And it's all about her control of the farm and the ways in which she has a very tenuous grasp on her life and on her possessions. And it's definitely a statement, a very like religious statement as well. There is some allusions to the story of King Nebuchadnezzar and him burning the 3, I'm not even going to try to say their names, but burning 3 men and then them surviving the fire and not being injured. There are some allusions to that Bible story. Not that the story reflects it exactly, but it is an allusion to that Bible story. And so there's a lot of layers to this one, and definitely cautionary tales. There's some cautionary tales. There's some very clear warnings for us to not be like the woman who owns the farm and to not hold on to our possessions too strongly. I thought this was really well written and very disturbing. In spot number 6, I'm going to put the artificial N-word. I don't even want to say it. It's very uncomfortable for me to say that. So I'm not going to say it. But this short story I really enjoyed. And then Christy Lewis told me that Flannery O'Connor actually liked this one the best out of her short stories in this collection. This was actually her favorite, which I find fascinating. It wasn't my favorite, so it's interesting to me that she thought it was the best one that she wrote. The story is about a young man and his grandfather, I think. Now I can't remember if it was father and son. I think it's grandfather and son. And this story is about the young boy wanting to go to the city. He believes, or he has been told, that he was born in Atlanta, and he wants to go to Atlanta to see what life in the big city is like. And the grandfather very reluctantly goes with him, and he kind of tells the son, like, you're gonna be disappointed. Like, the city life is not all it's cracked up to be, and we're better off in the country. But he goes with him to the city because the young man really wants to go, and so they go together and they have a bit of an adventure. I love this story because there are the generational differences between the young and the old, and then also there's some life lessons, there's some redemption that happens, there's some forgiveness that happens. The old man learning and becoming childlike, and then the young man becoming more wise like an old man. And so they sort of trade places in their understanding. They're both humbled in the way that they need to be humbled. But as the title kind of indicates, there's some big racial tension in the story as well. And I wasn't sure if it was really handled well. I'm still thinking about that. So that's why this story is a little bit lower on the totem pole, because I'm not sure that the race issues were dealt with very well. But I do love the journey of these two characters that they go on, and how much they learn from this experience, and also how much they don't learn in some ways at the end. At number 5, I'm putting Good Country People. This one I had actually read before, so this was a reread of this one. And this is considered one of Flannery O'Connor's strongest short stories by many critics. And I definitely agree. I can see why. This story has a very similar theme to A Good Man is Hard to Find, in that this stranger comes in to these people's lives and changes their lives in some way, shakes up their lives. And we also have some themes of disability. There's a character who has a prosthetic leg, and she is very well educated. She's a college graduate, like a philosophy major, as a woman, and so she's a very educated woman, and she also has this disability, and she's really the focus point of the story. And then when the stranger comes in, we have our plot that happens. And so I really like this story, and I like the theme that it follows. It's the same theme of A Good Man is Hard to Find. It's about very much the ugliness of mankind and not trusting people. Like, don't trust everyone, and the ways in which a person who's very educated could be blind to something as well, and that book smarts are not street smarts. At number 4, I am putting The Life You Save May Be Your Own. I read this story out loud to my husband when we were en route coming home from San Francisco. We went up to San Francisco on a trip in the first week of January, and so I actually read this one out loud with him. And we were a little puzzled by this one at first, but then the more I thought about it, the more I really liked this story. This story is also much more lighthearted, a little bit more comic in many ways, but still dark and still a bit of a tragedy at the end. But interesting. We see someone who is faced with two roads. He is faced with the good road and the evil road, and we find out which one he chooses. You could guess maybe which one he might choose or read the story and find out. I enjoyed the color symbolism in this. There's a lot of color imagery. Color and weather has a big part of the plot and the foreshadowing and the symbolism. So I really enjoyed getting to see that from Flannery O'Connor. She really likes to use nature as almost a character in her stories. Her nature writing is phenomenal. And I liked this story and how we saw someone make a choice between redemption or sin. And this one also follows a really similar theme of strangers coming in to an established family or core group and the ways that the strangers can change that family. Okay, we're getting into my top 3. So these ones are the creme de la creme, what I think are the best out of this collection. And so at number 3, I'm putting The Displaced Person. This one's actually a little bit more of a novella. It's the longest one out of the collection. It's probably maybe 30 or 40 pages, and it's split into 3 chapters, really. This one has to do a lot with immigrants and the way in which immigrants are treated in America. There's racial tension thrown into that as well. This is about an American woman who runs a farm. Again, there's definitely a few stories with a farm. This one, I believe, is most closely associated with Andalusia, which was the farm that I believe Flannery O'Connor's mom owned and she grew up on. So this farm in this book is supposed to be, I think, reflective of that. And Flannery O'Connor also took in refugees, Polish refugees. And so there's a lot of parallels between what Flannery actually experienced and the short story. So I found that to be fascinating. But this is about a woman who owns a farm who takes in a Polish family and as a worker and gives them shelter in exchange for work. And then she also has African American workers on her farm as well. And there's some tension that comes up between those groups. And then there's also an American white family who serves as servants as well on the farm. And so you end up having this tension between these groups. You have people who believe that they are entitled because they are from America and they're white, and then you have the African Americans feeling like we were here first, we've been here the longest on the farm, and we have a right to this work and to this farm. And then you have the Polish family who is very much the displaced people, and they are very heavily judged. They are from another country and they're very much considered other. I thought this story was fantastic in what it explores, and it's a heavy one, it's a dark one, but this one's a good one. I liked this. At spot number 2, I'm putting A Good Man is Hard to Find. This was my introduction to Flannery O'Connor, so I'm a little bit biased in that this was such a fascinating story to me from the beginning, and it still is. This is about a family on a road trip, and as they're going through the road trip, the grandmother's really the center, and the grandmother, you see a lot of her prejudices as she's romanticizing the past plantation South, and she's comparing it with the present South, and she's kind of longing for this past, and believes that people these days are not as good as they were back in the day. But the way the story unfolds is amazing. The villain of this story is incredible, and his mentality, and he has a speech at the end, which I love. And it's a dark one too. It's a dark one, but I love this story. And then at number 1, I'm putting The River. The River. I had a very visceral reaction to this story. I read this story out loud with Julio, so Julio read it too, and we ended up talking about The River for an hour after we had read it. we were just talking about it and interpreting it, and it was so good. The River follows this young boy who we find out has a pretty hard upbringing, and it's kind of about him discovering God and religion and Jesus and what those consequences are in his life, and it really makes you think hard. There's a lot of questions on whether or not this boy is better off or not, having religion. This is just like one of those stories that you could talk about in like a philosophy class, and I think just talk about it for hours. And it's also just beautifully crafted. It's really beautifully written. You see a lot through the boy's eyes as well, and so the perspective in this story is really well written, and the symbolism, and I just loved it. I loved all the characters as well and what they represent. This is a great story. This story deserves a video all on its own, which I contemplated doing. Maybe I still will. But yes, The River is my favorite short story in this collection. And that'll be it for me. It was really hard to rank all these because they all offer something different. They're all wonderful. I hope you get to pick some of these short stories up, and I would love to know your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new here, and hit the little bell icon so that you don't miss any videos from me. I would love to hear some of your comments down below. Have you read any Flannery O'Connor lately? Are you reading with us? I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Keep reading great books, and until next time, bye-bye.